We are very, very pleased to have as a speaker this morning Barry O'Connell. Barry, and he specializes in high-performance databases. Barry loves data. And he also loves internet writing. He has lots of it. He has over 100 sites, the best known of which is called Spongo Bongo, and contributes a lot to the field, a lot of interesting ideas, and we're going to get to share in one of those interesting ideas this morning as Barry talks to us about ethnolinguistic examination of Caucasian rugs. Please join me in welcoming Barry O'Connell.
I feel very, very honored and humbled to be here. You know, in this room have come some of the great minds in Oriental rugs. You know, when you look back over the years, the giants of this field, guys like Sherman, Ellis, Harold Caucasian, and so many others, right, Harold? Have come up here and advanced their ideas. And in many ways, what we do here in this room is the closest thing we have to a graduate level course in Oriental rugs in this country. We don't push this in our universities. Canada graduated someone with a doctorate in Oriental rugs. England has done it a handful of times. But we push what we do here. I don't think I'm up to the level of the greats, but I've been working on some thoughts for a long, long time, and I want to share them with you. Let me see. Now, I tend to be at heart a pessimist. There's times when I feel like I've come in at the tail end of things. You know, the concept that the razor blade is never going to be sharper than it was this morning, that things won't be as good, that things that were great are less so, that things are going downhill. And at one point I felt like the Textile Museum, like the glory days of the Textile Museum were gone, that the best days were over, that they had passed us by. And now I look at the Textile Museum with a feeling of hope. I look at the men on the board of men and women on the board of trustees, and I see the finest group of rug collectors probably of any time in the history of the museum. I look at the president, Bruce Gans, and the work he does, and I look at the commitment that they've shown by bringing in Daniel Walker, who of all museum professionals that I know of anywhere, Daniel has the very best credentials that you could possibly have in the field of Oriental rugs. There is no one in the United States better suited, and there is no one in the world better qualified than Daniel. I think what's happening at the Textile Museum, I think it's a wonderful time. But I don't have this picture up here to be nice to Daniel. It's actually the other guy I wanted to talk about. I was boiling down my ideas, and a lot of times there's a fellow out in Tennessee, Jim Allen, and I'll bounce ideas off of Jim, and I explained to him what I was going to talk about today. And Jim goes, well, and you know, he's got that Tennessee accent. And, well, Barry, he said it's the same thing John Thompson did about 30 years ago. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, in Turkmen rugs, we stopped using place names. We started using tribal names. It's the same thing. Now, I show you, this is not a trick. This is, I picked it because it's a typical rug. It's an example of type. So when we look at this, I hope nobody in the room would disagree with me when I say it's a techie rug. So what do I mean when I say this is a techie rug? Didn't come from a town called Techie. What we mean is this was woven by a techie weaver. You know, at one point I was out at George O'Bannon's, and I always had the feeling George didn't quite approve of me, but nice guy. Anyway, we're talking about rugs, and I mentioned something about the Timoris and the Taimanis of Afghanistan. He stops me and he says, how can you talk about groups that ceased to exist over 100 years ago? There hasn't been, the Chahari Mak haven't been in existence since the 1880s. I said, I'm not talking about a geopolitical entity. I'm not talking about membership in a formalized tribe. I'm talking about language. When I say Timuri or Taimani or Baluch or Turkmen, I'm talking very specifically about a weaver that speaks that language. So when we talk about this is a techie main carpet, what we mean is it's roughly about 6 square meters and it was woven by a woman who spoke techie. That is what, and that's really what this comes down to. Identifying people not by, we're no longer interested in Princess Bokharas and the Tijan Oasis and rugs woven near Ashgabat and rugs woven near Merv. We're not dividing things by the oases. We're dividing things by the languages. So that's much of what I want to do today. You know, it's funny, Murray Island, and I love Murray. I mean, he's just one of the great authors, and I've learned so much from him. But Murray always insisted that he went to Afghanistan and went around asking people and could never identify anyone who was Ursari. And so when he'd ask people, "Are you Ursari?" people would say no. So anyway, I'm in a local rug warehouse, and I say to one of the guys, "Pass me the Kal Mohammadi on top of the pile." And this guy jumps up, and his hands are moving, and his lips are moving, and he's speaking in a language that I don't speak, and I don't have a clue what he's saying. And my friend Zia smiles, and he says, "Barry, he sees that you know his father's rugs." It was Kal Muhammad's son, Ibrahim, who was then visiting, because he is one of his major importers in the United States. He was in visiting, and he was so excited to hear that somebody recognized his father's rugs. And these are some of the very best rugs made across. Back when Mazar Sharif was virtually an independent country and had their own airline, and General Dostam, the warlord, had created this little kingdom, the main export, besides white powdery substance, I don't know what that was, it's probably talcum. Anyway, the main export were rugs from Kal Muhammad. And so I asked him, "Are you Ursari?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, what people are you of?" He said, "I'm Turkmen." I said, "Oh, what language do you speak?" "Ursari." Okay, they don't think of themselves as Ursari, they think of themselves as Turkmen. But meaningfully enough for us, they're still identifiable by the dialect of the language they speak. And that, standing in front of the penguin exhibit at the Berlin Zoo, is Kal Muhammad and his son Ibrahim. And one, I love the penguins. I think they're cute. And two, the other part that I find very interesting in this whole thing is that I was one of the people that helped edit Emmett Island's book on whatever he calls it, Carpets of Today. You know, it's a real nice book. The one thing we disagreed on was I said Kal Muhammad was a real person, and he insisted no, Kal Muhammad was just a legend, he never really existed. So having a picture of him in front of the penguins I always found satisfying. Let's get over to the Caucasus, because that's why we're here today.